You won't believe what people confessed when they thought only God was listening. A priest opens a leather-bound book. The ink is faded, but the words still burn. What if the most honest love stories in history were never meant to be read by us? Because tonight, we're opening the confessional. Close your eyes and imagine this. It's the year 1327, a cold stone church somewhere in medieval Europe. The walls sweat with damp. Candles flicker like nervous witnesses. A man kneels. Not a king, not a knight, just a baker shaking. He whispers through a wooden screen. "Father, I have sinned." But what follows isn't murder. It isn't theft. It's love. A forbidden glance. A secret touch. A name he was never supposed to say out loud. And here's the thing most people don't realize. These confessions were written down, hidden for centuries, preserved in church records. Real words, real people, real desire. Tonight, we're reading them. And once you hear what they said, you'll never see the Middle Ages the same way again. The medieval confessional wasn't just a ritual. It was the most dangerous room in the world. Because here, you couldn't lie, or so they believed. Priests were trained to ask questions. Detailed questions. Who was she? How many times? Did you love her? Or was it lust? And scribes recorded answers in Latin manuals called penitentials. They weren't meant to be emotional, but emotion leaked through the ink. One 14th-century English record reads, "I loved her not as a man should love a woman, but as my soul loves rest." That wasn't poetry. That was a confession. Let's start with Agnes. We know her name because her lover couldn't stop saying it. The record comes from France, late 1200s. A man confesses, "I entered her home as a friend of her husband, but I stayed as something else." Agnes was married. Her husband traveled for trade. The town knew. The confessor pressed harder. "Did you sin once? Or often?" The answer, "Often enough that I forgot fear." That line is devastating, because fear was everywhere in medieval life. Hell, disease, public punishment, and yet, love erased it. But here's the twist. Agnes didn't confess. He did, which means she kept living, kept smiling at church. While his guilt grew unbearable, he was sentenced to fasting, public penance, and never speaking her name again. But he already had, in ink. Now, this one shook historians, because it comes from inside the convent. A 15th-century Italian record documents a priest's private notes. He writes, "Sister Beatrice wept before she spoke." Beatrice was a nun since childhood. No choice, no dowry. The convent was her fate. Her confession, "I love God, but I love him too." He was a visiting cleric, a man assigned to hear confessions. She described their hands touching through sleeves, their eyes lingering during prayer. The priest asked the unthinkable, "Did he know?" Her answer, "He trembled as I did." This wasn't seduction. This was mutual collapse. And the punishment? She was transferred, locked away, silenced. But her words survived. And they tell us something uncomfortable. Even vows made to God didn't erase the human heart. This is where things get very quiet. Because medieval church records do mention same-sex love. Not often, but clearly. One penitential from Germany, 1400s, records a confession. "I have loved him as a wife loves her husband." The priest didn't ask if. He asked how long. Years. They worked together. Shared bread. Shared beds during winter. The record doesn't name them, but it preserves something radical. Not just desire, but companionship. The punishment was severe. Exile. Permanent separation. And yet the confessor adds a note in the margin. He wept not for the sin, but for the loss. That's not doctrine. That's humanity leaking through. Now we reach the most heartbreaking record. England. Early 1300s. A young woman confesses to loving a priest. She says, "I did not seek him. I only listened." They met during grief. After her child died, the priest comforted her. Too often, too closely, she fell in love. He did not confess. She did. The church's judgment was swift. Public shame. Permanent exclusion from communion. And then this final line appears in the record. She asked if God hated her. There is no answer written. Just silence. These weren't legends. They weren't myths. They were ordinary people. People who loved too much. Too openly. In the wrong century, the church tried to control desire, to catalog it, to punish it. But instead, it accidentally preserved the most honest love stories of the Middle Ages. Stories never meant for us, but desperately needed by us. Because they remind us, love has always existed in the cracks, between rules, between fear and hope. So here's the question I'll leave you with. How many love stories were never lived because someone was brave enough to confess? If these voices from the past moved you, if they made history feel human, leave a comment. Tell me which confession stayed with you. And if you want more stories the history books try to hide, you know what to do. Subscribe, because the past is still whispering, and we're listening.